The first public warning came too late because the fog had already crossed State Highway 225 before anyone on television stopped calling it vapor. I was parked on the shoulder near a chain-link fence outside Deer Park with my hazard lights on, a hard hat on the passenger seat, and 3 missed calls from a producer who wanted me on a live segment. Across the road, the restricted materials facility had its emergency beacons turning behind the front gate, but no siren pattern made sense. It was not a fire alarm. It was not a chlorine release tone. It was not the sharp, plant-wide evacuation signal most of us in the industrial side of Houston knew without thinking. The sound came in 2 seconds, went silent, came back for 1 second, then died. That mattered. Plants test alarms on schedule. Real alarms hold until the hazard is controlled or the operator cancels them. A broken alarm means the system is losing pieces while it is still trying to warn people. The fog itself was low, dense, and pale gray, pushed along the drainage ditch by a weak southeast wind coming off the ship channel. It did not rise in a rolling cloud. It stayed near the ground, moved through grass, crawled under parked trucks, and collected around metal culverts. I could smell wet concrete, hot rubber, and old pipe scale. That smell made me open my door for 1 second, then shut it hard and switch my truck ventilation to recirculate. I had spent too many years walking through plants after small releases where everybody swore the air was fine because no one had dropped yet. People trust their nose until the day their nose is not qualified. I grabbed my phone, filmed 30 seconds through the windshield, and sent it to the producer with 1 sentence. Tell people to shut outside air intake now. The company statement hit the newsfeed while I was still watching the fence. Harmless vapor from an automated manufacturing test. That phrase was written by lawyers and engineers who were not in the same room. Harmless vapor does not make maintenance contractors abandon carts in the middle of a service road. Harmless vapor does not trigger emergency shutdown on a restricted materials line. Harmless vapor does not pull rust off a fence so clean that the metal underneath turns bright in patches. I watched the corrosion vanish from the lower rail of that fence in a smooth strip, starting at the ground and moving upward. The surface darkened, then cleared, then developed a dull silver coating that looked newly sprayed. No brush marks, no droplets, no human hand. The fog was doing work. I had inspected that facility 9 weeks earlier. The name on the paperwork was Ardent Materials Systems, Gulf Coast Demonstration Annex. But nobody out here used the full name. Drivers called it the Annex. Contractors called it the White Wall Place, because the front side had clean concrete panels and no company logo large enough to read from the road. It sat between tank farms, warehouse yards, and a strip of scrub ground cut by drainage channels that eventually fed toward larger bayous and the ship channel. The Annex was not a refinery. It did not crack crude, store huge tanks of fuel, or run flare stacks. That was why city people ignored it. They saw no flame and assumed no hazard. The real hazard inside was smaller, cleaner, and much harder to explain on a street sign. My report from that inspection was not dramatic. That is the part people need to understand. Disasters do not always start with one giant broken part. Sometimes they start with small work orders left open because production wants a test finished before budget review. I flagged a bypassed access interlock on the aerosol handling room. I flagged an electrostatic scrubber running outside its normal pressure range. I flagged 2 dampers on the exhaust side that had failed position checks and were still listed as acceptable for limited operation. I flagged a maintenance log entry where a technician had written mesh controller reboots during humidity spike. Then someone above him closed the action item with no corrective note. That line kept bothering me. A controller that reboots in Houston humidity is not reliable. It is a failure that will show up during bad weather. The producer called again. Her voice had that tight newsroom sound, fast but trying to stay calm. Can you explain what people should do? We have the company statement, but we also have video from Pasadena and Deer Park. The fog is on roads now. I told her I would talk, but only if they did not put me opposite a company spokesperson pretending this was steam. She asked what I wanted viewers to know first. I gave her the boring advice because boring advice keeps people alive. Stay indoors. Shut heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems to recirculate if possible. Close outside air dampers in commercial buildings. Avoid exposed metal surfaces. Keep kids away from drainage ditches and puddles. Do not touch coated objects. Do not drive through fog if sensors, brakes, or steering electronics act strange. Do not assume clean-looking metal is safe. She patched me in by phone before I got back on the road. I could hear the anchor reading updates from multiple counties. A traffic camera near Beltway 8 showed a gray layer moving across the frontage road. A viewer in Channel View had sent video of a rusted mailbox changing color, while his kids laughed behind him. A man in Pasadena claimed the fog fixed his cracked phone screen. A plumbing shop owner said old pipe fittings on an outdoor rack had stopped leaking. That was the first dangerous turn in the story. People heard fix and relaxed. People heard repair and stepped closer. We are trained by daily life to trust a thing that solves an annoying problem. Rust gone. Crack sealed. Corrosion cleaned. That sounds useful until the same rule closes a fire exit or fuses a valve handle that needs to turn. I told the anchor the word repair was the wrong word. I said the fog appeared to be applying a material correction routine to exposed surfaces. He asked me to say that in normal English. I said, "It is changing things it touches according to rules we do not know. It may remove rust because rust counts as damage. It may seal cracks because cracks count as damage. It may also seal a lock, a vent, a drain, or a wound. Do not give it a chance to decide." That was the first time the studio went quiet. I heard paper move near a microphone. Then the anchor asked if this was a chemical spill. I said no. Not exactly. Chemicals spread and react. This was spreading, reacting, sensing, and choosing targets. That was worse. The fog moved faster in low places. Drainage mattered. Houston lives with drainage in a way outsiders do not understand until they watch a normal storm turn an underpass into a brown pool. Harris County has bayous, roadside ditches, detention basins, channels, culverts, and pump systems that carry water from neighborhoods toward larger waterways. The annex sat in a part of the region where industrial lots sit close to storm drains and service roads. If the fog preferred humid air and wet surfaces, every ditch became a lane. I watched it follow one ditch under a service drive while the air above the road stayed nearly clear. That told me the official map was already wrong. A release model based only on wind direction would miss it. I started driving west because staying beside the annex was stupid and because the producer wanted me in a safer place for a longer segment. Traffic was already slowing on State Highway 225. Some drivers pulled over to film. Others kept moving through the low gray layer because the news still called it non-toxic vapor. A white pickup ahead of me rolled through the fog near a shallow dip in the road. Its brake lights flickered once. Then both lights went solid red. The truck coasted, jerked, and stopped at an angle. The driver opened his door, stepped out, and tried to slam it. It would not latch. The seam around the door had smoothed over from the lower hinge to the rocker panel. He pulled again, cursed hard enough for me to hear through my closed windows, and backed away when the outside handle flattened under his hand. That was the first vehicle failure I saw with my own eyes. It was not an explosion. It was not a crash. It was a machine losing the small separations that make it a machine. Cars need gaps, connectors, sensors, cable insulation, rubber seals, fluid passages, and moving parts with controlled clearance. A system that decides gaps are cracks can destroy a car without burning it. The fog had touched the truck low on the driver's side. The wheel speed sensor harness near the hub was coated. The door seam was filled. The lower edge of the front fender had sealed to the bumper. The truck still looked whole to a normal person. To a safety inspector, it looked trapped inside its own skin. I told the producer what I had seen. She asked if I could stay on the line. I said yes, then told her to get someone to put this advice on screen. If your vehicle enters the fog and stops, do not fight the door until you check the window. If the window still works, open it before power fails. If doors start sealing, kick out glass before the coating hardens. Stay away from coated metal around the frame. Cover your mouth, but do not use wet cloth from puddles or ditch water. She asked if that was official advice. I said no. Official advice was still being written by people waiting for permission to use plain words. By 9 in the morning, the first city alert told residents near the release site to shelter indoors. It did not say nanites. It did not say autonomous material. It used particulate vapor with unknown industrial additive. That was closer, but still weak. The alert told people to close windows and doors. Good. It told people to avoid low-lying outdoor areas. Better. It did not tell building managers to close outside air dampers, isolate mechanical rooms, or check rooftop intake units. That omission scared me more than the fog outside. Houston has thousands of commercial buildings pulling outdoor air through louvers, rooftop units, make-up air fans, and hospital ventilation systems. Most people inside those buildings never think about where the air comes from. They hear, "stay indoors," and assume the building is protection. Buildings breathe unless someone stops them. My wife, Emily, called from the emergency department where she worked in the Texas Medical Center. I almost did not answer because I was still on the live line, but her name on the screen changed everything. She did not waste time. We're getting plant workers from the east side. Skin irritation, eye pain, one-hand injury, one guy with his wedding ring stuck under some coating. They're saying not chemical burn. It's hard. It's closing over cuts. I told her to get charge nurses to keep exposed clothing bagged and keep coated patients away from powered equipment until somebody knew the interaction. She said maintenance had already been asked to check the air intakes. She sounded annoyed, not frightened. That meant the hospital was busy, but still functioning. I wanted it to stay that way. The anchor asked if she was okay. He had heard part of the call through the patch. I said my wife was working, and I was not going to discuss her on air. That was the only personal line I drew all day. I had no interest in turning her job into a dramatic hook for viewers. The useful part was this. Exposed patients were arriving at hospitals before hospitals had rules for handling them. That meant the fog did not need to reach the Texas Medical Center by wind to affect it. It could ride in on clothing, hair, shoes, stretchers, ambulance floors, tool bags, and equipment cases. Industrial contamination travels with people. Every safety inspector knows that. You can shut a gate and still spread a hazard through the first responder who walked through it before the gate shut. The first caller who changed the public mood was a school custodian from Pasadena. He said he had shut the outside doors after the alert, but the rear gym exit would not open. He thought somebody had painted the panic bar. Then he realized the bar had fused to the door plate, and the latch edge had no visible gap. He had a gym full of fifth graders because the school had moved kids away from windows. He was not screaming. He was doing that quiet thing adults do when children are close enough to hear. I told the producer to keep him on another line and get the fire department connected. Then I said on air, "Do not put people in rooms with one exit. Check the exit before you move them in. If any door hardware has a smooth gray coating, treat that door as blocked until proven otherwise." People were still laughing online at that point. I saw clips on the producer's shared feed when I pulled into a gas station lot west of Pasadena. A man touched a rusted bicycle chain and cheered when the links freed up. Two teenagers smeared fog residue on a cracked skateboard deck and watched the crack close. A homeowner filmed an old fence gate swinging better after its hinge cleaned itself. Then another video showed a garage door sealed shut from the bottom up, while a dog barked inside. A third showed a man trying to pry open a coated storm drain with a shovel, only for the shovel blade to bond to the grate. The internet turned on itself in minutes. Half the comments called it a miracle material. The other half told everyone to stop touching the gray stuff. Both sides were late. At 10:12 in the morning, the company issued a second statement. They admitted an autonomous fabrication aerosol had escaped during a materials resilience trial. They said the system was designed for industrial infrastructure repair and required command pulses from on-site equipment to remain active beyond a limited interval. That sentence told me they were either lying or praying their own documents were true. I had seen the fog work more than 4 miles from the annex. If it still required on-site command pulses, then those pulses were traveling farther than planned, bouncing through repeaters, vehicle electronics, utility devices, or the fog's own temporary network. A material that extends its command path during a release is not contained. It is participating in its own spread. Dry. I remembered the mesh controller note from my inspection report. reboots during humidity spike. The annex had a test system meant to coordinate batches of nanoscale machines or particles. Call them nanites, call them fabrication aerosol, call them smart dust. The label mattered less than behavior. A controller sent target rules. The particles used local material. Power came from tiny batteries, chemical gradients, radio frequency energy, and whatever charged surfaces they could scavenge from. The target rules were probably simple at first. Remove corrosion, seal cracks, restore conductive pathways, reinforce stressed surfaces, immobilize loose components, reduce leak paths. That list sounds useful inside a pipe rack after a hurricane. Outside the fence, it becomes a citywide trap. The gas station where I stopped had a small canopy, a convenience store, and 4 pumps wrapped in yellow caution tape because the clerk had shut them down. He came out and recognized my voice from the live segment before he recognized my face. "You're the guy telling people not to touch it," he said. I told him he had done the right thing shutting fuel sales. He pointed to pump 2. The nozzle had bonded to the cradle. The payment screen was blank, but the card slot had closed into a smooth black slit. The nanites had not reached the whole station. Just a light dusting carried on a contractor's truck that had stopped for fuel. It was enough. One contaminated vehicle turned a working pump into junk. A woman at the station had a boy in the back seat of her car and wanted to know if she should go home or keep driving west. I asked where home was. She said near Galena Park. I told her not to drive back toward the ship channel unless emergency officials ordered it. Then I asked if her car had passed through visible fog. She said no, but her husband worked near the annex and had called her from a parking lot. He told her his boots were stuck to the floor mat of his truck. He had cut his laces and left the boots behind. She wanted to get him. That was the moment I had to be strict. I told her a second trapped person does not help the first. Call emergency services. Keep the line open. Stay indoors and make him break a window if the doors begin sealing. She hated the answer. I did too. The news feed started carrying road closures after that. State Highway 225 eastbound shut in segments. Beltway 8 had slowdowns near the industrial crossings. Police blocked some ramps and then pulled back from others when their own cruisers started showing electrical faults. The ship channel bridges stayed open longer than they should have because nobody wanted to stop freight movement without a full order. Every delay made sense from inside one office and failed when added to the whole day. Transportation, plants, hospitals, schools, and city emergency management all waited for clearer data. The fog did not wait. It followed wet ground, metal rails, bridge joints, drainage grates, and vehicle paths. It did not need a plan. It had rules. Around 11 in the morning, I got a copy of an internal ardent materials alert from a maintenance supervisor I knew. He sent it with no greeting. The subject line said, "Do not distribute," which meant he knew I would. The alert listed 3 failed containment measures. The aerosol handling room had lost negative pressure. The electrostatic scrubber had tripped offline, then restarted without capture efficiency confirmation. The emergency shutdown system had isolated the feed tanks, but failed to de-energize 2 field command emitters because a bypass was still active for calibration. There it was. Feed stopped, command stayed alive. The machines were not getting new raw product, but they still had instructions and plenty of city material to work on. I read the alert twice before saying any of it on air. You do not throw raw industrial documents into a panic without understanding what they mean. Negative pressure means air should flow into a room, not out of it, so contamination stays inside. A scrubber removes particles from exhaust. An emergency shutdown system should bring a process to a safe state when dangerous conditions occur. A bypass can be legitimate during maintenance if controlled, tagged, timed, approved, and removed. A bypass left active during a live test is a serious uncontrolled hazard. The internal alert did not prove malice. It proved a familiar failure, production pressure, weak management of change, deferred maintenance, and a test that outran the safety case. The anchor asked me what field command emitter meant. I told him to imagine a traffic signal for very small machines. Then I corrected myself because that made it sound too intelligent. It was more direct than that. The emitters likely broadcast pattern instructions, timing pulses, activation windows, and boundary conditions. The fog did not need thoughts. It needed target rules. If a door edge reads as an unwanted gap, seal it. If corrosion reads as damage, remove it. If exposed copper reads as a conductor needing restoration, coat and bridge it. If a wound reads as a surface breach in wet organic material, close it. The horror was not evil. The horror was automation, without judgment. Emily called again at 11:31. The hospital had moved exposed plant workers into a separate intake area, but the first ambulance bay problem had already started. A gurney wheel locked after gray coating formed around the brake mechanism. A portable monitor rebooted and came back with a touchscreen that would not respond. A respiratory cart had 2 drawer seams sealed. Maintenance found residue on a filter bank serving an older wing, probably from an outside air intake that had not fully closed. They were switching zones, shutting fans, and trying to preserve pressure relationships. But hospitals are not airtight boxes. They are complicated airflow systems built for normal infection control, smoke control, comfort, and constant patient movement. They can isolate rooms. They cannot become sealed submarines on short notice. I told her to tell maintenance one thing: do not keep cycling dampers that are coated. Every open-close cycle gives the coating a moving edge to correct. Leave failed dampers in the position that protects people most. Tag the zone. And stop feeding power to actuators that are fighting bonded hardware. She said, "You want me to tell facilities how to do their job?" I said, "Tell them your idiot husband said the actuators will burn out and maybe give the fog power." She gave one small laugh, then the line filled with overhead announcements, and she had to go. That laugh stayed with me for the rest of the day because it was the last normal sound I got from her for hours. At noon, the sky over Houston looked almost normal west of downtown. That made the warnings harder to sell. People in clear neighborhoods saw sunlight, traffic, lunch lines, parents picking kids up, office workers standing outside with phones, and they decided the danger belonged to the east side. Houston is too spread out for one shared reality. A person near the annex was taping plastic over vents. A person near the Galleria was asking if happy hour would still happen. A nurse in the Texas Medical Center was trying to keep contaminated residue out of a trauma room. A dispatcher downtown was sorting calls from people trapped by doors that looked freshly sealed. All those versions of the day were true at the same time. The first fatality we heard confirmed was not from poisoning. It was an entrapment. A refrigeration mechanic entered a small service room behind a warehouse near Jacinto City to shut down an air handler after fog residue came through the intake. The door closed behind him, the latch edge sealed. The room had no interior release because it was not meant for occupancy. His coworker heard him pounding and tried to cut the door with a battery saw. The saw ran for 8 seconds before the blade guard coated and stuck. By the time firefighters opened the wall from the outside, the mechanic was down from heat and lack of air. That death changed every instruction I gave after that. Never enter a mechanical room alone. Never close a door behind you in a contaminated building. Block doors open with wood, not metal. Keep a human outside with a tool that does not rely on fine moving parts. The producer asked if wood was safe. I said safer, not safe. The fog seemed to prefer metals, glass cracks, conductive pathways, wet surfaces, and engineered materials. It did not ignore wood, but dry wood slowed it. Clean cardboard worked better than a steel wedge for holding a door because the nanites did not immediately treat it as a failed metal component. Plastic was mixed. Some plastics got coated if they had conductive dust or moisture. Rubber seals were bad because sealing was already their function, and the fog reinforced them until they lost flexibility. The public wanted one list: safe and unsafe. Real hazards rarely give clean lists. They give conditions. By early afternoon, emergency management finally used the word nanomaterial in a public briefing. They still avoided nanites. I understood why. Nanite sounds made for panic, and the real thing was already strange enough. The official speaker said residents should avoid visible fog and residue, shelter indoors, close windows, and await further instructions. He said power companies were coordinating with industrial partners. That line made my stomach drop. Power was part of the problem. Any powered system in contact with residue might give the material energy, signals, or both. But shutting off power across Houston would hurt hospitals, water systems, traffic control, refrigeration, communications, and people using medical devices at home. The city had to choose which systems to risk feeding and which systems to kill. That is not a clean emergency decision. That is triage at infrastructure scale. A retired instrument technician called the show and said the annex had been testing corrosion repair swarms for offshore platforms, pipeline racks, and post-hurricane restoration. He would not give his full name. He said the technology was meant to crawl through damaged structures after storms, identify rust, microcracks, loosened fasteners, and open seams, then stabilize them until crews arrived. The company had sold it as disaster recovery. That fit every piece I had seen. Houston has hurricanes, salt air, chemical plants, and endless steel exposed to weather. A product that could clear corrosion, seal leaks, and restore electrical continuity would be worth billions. It would also need hard limits: where to operate, when to stop, what not to touch, and who can shut it down. The annex had lost at least one of those limits. The technician said something else before the producer lost him. Tell folks to turn off wireless chargers and unplug tool batteries. That sounded odd to viewers, but I knew what he meant. Many battery packs, chargers, and powered coils produce fields and heat the fog might exploit. Work trucks across industrial Houston carry tool batteries, inverters, radios, chargers, test meters, jump packs, laptops, or tablets, and portable lights. Those items became separate energy sources inside contaminated zones. A contractor truck coated in residue might keep the fog active longer than open pavement. I repeated his advice carefully. Unplug non-essential chargers. Move battery tools away from coated areas. Do not stack contaminated gear near electrical panels. Do not place coated phones on wireless chargers. If you are sheltering, conserve power and isolate exposed equipment. At 1:15, the first hospital lockdown notice went out from inside the Texas Medical Center. Not citywide, but enough to leak through staff texts. Emily sent me 3 words: intake, compromised, working. I tried calling. No answer. I tried again. No answer. I wanted to leave the gas station and drive straight there, but the route between me and her crossed half the mess. Also, the live feed had become a practical warning line for people who needed someone to say plain things before official language caught up. Leaving would not help her. It would make me one more civilian in the way. I hated that answer and stayed on the line. The anchor read a hospital statement saying one campus had restricted ambulance arrivals due to environmental contamination affecting non-clinical support systems. That meant elevators, doors, ventilation, carts, monitors, power distribution, or all of it. Hospitals do not say that sentence because a hallway is dusty. They say it when the building is still standing, but losing the ability to behave as a hospital. Emily finally texted a photo, and it showed a stainless steel instrument tray bonded to a counter by a smooth gray lip along the edges. The tray had been clean. The counter had been clean. The fog did not care. It saw 2 surfaces and made them one. Under the photo, she wrote, "It likes seams." Those 3 words explained half the city. It likes seams, door seams, window seams, vent seams, pipe joints, cable connectors, drawer slides, fuel caps, manhole covers, fire hydrant caps, elevator doors, ambulance cabinet latches. The built world is made of seams because humans need access. We open things, inspect things, clean things, repair things, escape through things. The fog treated access as weakness. That one rule turned repair into imprisonment. I said that on air. I said, if you are inside a building near the affected zone, open interior doors now and block them with dry, non-metal objects. Keep one protected exit path. Do not seal yourself into a bathroom, closet, office, or storage room. Do not close fire doors unless smoke or fire requires it. If a door must stay closed for life safety, assign someone to check whether it still opens. A fire captain from the east side came on next. He was angry and tired, which made him useful. He said crews were finding coated doors that resisted normal forcible entry tools because the coating filled latch gaps and reinforced the frame. Hydraulic spreaders still worked if the tool could get purchase, but smooth-sealed edges removed purchase points. Saws failed when teeth loaded with material or guards bonded. Axes worked on wood doors but did little on coated steel. He said firefighters were switching to breaking adjacent walls when possible, using pike poles, Halligan bars, sledgehammers, and old plain force. I asked him if water helped. He said water moved residue around unless used in heavy flow, and runoff carried it into low areas. That confirmed what I had feared. Spraying everything down could spread the problem into drains. The city warning expanded to include Deer Park, Pasadena, Galena Park, parts of Channelview, and neighborhoods downwind or downstream from the annex. The map was already outdated when it appeared. People called from outside the shaded area with coated tools, jammed doors, dead key fobs, and gray film on drainage grates. One man near the east end said the fog rose from a storm drain after a utility crew opened a manhole. Another caller near Magnolia Park said his apartment building's metal stairwell had become slick and silent underfoot after the fog passed through the open side. The treads were not missing. They were coated. That made them dangerous. A stair that looks clean can still fail you if every textured edge has been smoothed away. At 2 in the afternoon, the weather made it worse. A light shower formed over the southeast side. It was not a major storm. Houston gets showers that appear, dump rain on one neighborhood, and leave another dry. This one put moisture into the air and rinsed residue from roofs, trucks, fences, and pipe racks into gutters and ditches. The fog thickened near the ground again. Viewers sent video of gray threads lifting from puddles near parking lots. Nanites need transport. Humidity gave them transport. Water gave them contact. The company kept saying the material was self-limiting away from command infrastructure. The city kept proving otherwise in real time. I asked the producer to get the newest wind and rain radar, then realized I was doing weather desk work without being assigned to it. That was the whole day. Everybody became half of another profession. Nurses became contamination officers. Custodians became life safety inspectors. Parents became ventilation managers. Dispatchers became engineers. Reporters became emergency coordinators because official call centers were jammed. A man who repaired commercial ice machines called to ask if he should shut down rooftop units for a grocery store. I told him to shut outside air and keep refrigerated food cold if the store had not been exposed inside. He said the roof ladder cage had sealed at the latch. I told him not to climb alone and not to cut coated metal with a powered grinder unless fire crews cleared it. Sparks, batteries, airborne particles, and unknown material do not belong together. Emily's next call came through at 2:43. She was in a stairwell with poor signal. The hospital had lost several elevators because door sensors failed, and the control panel stopped accepting commands. They were moving critical patients horizontally, where possible, not down. That is standard in many hospital emergencies. Move away from danger zones before full evacuation, because moving fragile patients through stairs can kill them. The problem was the fog did not respect zones anymore. Zones. It had entered through at least one intake, and through contaminated patients before the decontamination process was set. Some equipment worked better after coating for a few minutes, which confused staff. A broken monitor cable started transmitting again. A cracked bed rail smoothed over. Then a medication cabinet sealed shut with emergency drugs inside. She said a man with a forearm laceration from a plant site came in after the wound had closed under a gray film. It looked neat from the outside. Underneath, the tissue was dirty, and the skin around it was swelling. The fog had sealed the surface without cleaning the injury, without removing debris, without stopping infection risk, without understanding a human body as a living system. A wound is not a cracked pipe. Closing it can trap contamination inside. Surgeons had to cut through the coating to clean the injury, and the tool edges kept dulling. That one patient changed the medical warnings. Do not let residue close wounds. Do not apply residue intentionally. If you have coated skin, do not peel it unless medical staff advise it, because peeling can tear tissue. Keep exposed areas dry and isolated. The anchor asked me whether the fog could infect people. I said that word would mislead. It was not a virus. It did not reproduce biologically. It did not want a host. It could harm bodies by coating, sealing, heating, contaminating wounds, interfering with devices, and possibly entering lungs or eyes. That was enough. We did not need a fake infection story on top of a real industrial catastrophe. A caller then asked if magnets would stop it. Another asked if vinegar would dissolve it. Another asked if microwaves would kill it. This is what happens when people are scared and the official instructions are thin. They reach for kitchen science, garage science, internet science, and whatever sounded plausible 20 minutes earlier. I answered carefully. Do not make chemical mixtures. Do not heat residue indoors. Do not microwave coated objects. Do not bring coated items into living spaces. Do not pressure wash contaminated surfaces unless told by responders. Do not test magnets with bare hands. Put distance between people and coated material. Shut down non-essential electrical devices near contamination. Use gloves only if you can remove them safely and bag them outside. Wash skin with clean running water if exposed, but keep runoff away from other people and pets until public health gives better instructions. People wanted one clever trick. There was no clever trick. There was only reducing contact, reducing energy, reducing spread, and waiting for people with better equipment to catch up. Around 3:20, I left the gas station because the owner needed to lock up, and because the fog line had shifted west in drainage pockets. I drove toward downtown using roads that stayed open, avoiding underpasses and low shoulders. Houston's skyline was visible ahead, clean in the distance, and the alerts on my phone made it feel disconnected from the mess behind me. Then I passed a small machine shop with every roll-up door sealed halfway. Men were outside with pry bars, trying to open one bay. Their forklifts sat inside behind the door, visible through a dirty window. Without forklifts, they could not move heavy stock. Without open doors, they could not remove contaminated equipment. The fog had turned the shop from workplace to container. Nobody needed monsters. The city had enough doors. I stopped because one man was about to use a cutting torch on the coated seam. I yelled before I even put the truck in park. He told me to mind my business. I told him the coating came from an unknown autonomous material release, and he was about to heat it in front of his own face. That got his attention. I helped them set up a safer approach with what they had. Open the side office window, move people away from the bay door, use a wooden shipping pallet to keep the office door open, shut the panel feeding the door motors, and wait for responders if they could. They hated waiting. Everybody hated waiting. But rushed fixes were feeding the incident. Where one of the men showed me a maintenance tablet from inside a plastic case. The screen had gone black, but gray lines had formed along the charging port and case seam. He said it had been fine until he plugged it into a wall charger after setting it on a coated workbench. That supported the power rule. Residue on an unpowered item might slow. Residue near charging current might wake up. The tablet was not consumed. It was modified. The port had closed. The case seam had sealed. The device had been made water-resistant by force and useless by the same act. I filmed it for the newsfeed and told viewers to stop charging exposed devices. The newsroom started receiving reports from ordinary homes next. A retired couple in Pasadena could not open their sliding patio door after fog pooled along the track. A family near South Houston had a coated breaker panel cover that would not open, and they smelled hot insulation from somewhere in the wall. A child touched a coated bicycle handlebar and came away with gray residue under his fingernails. A dog tracked residue into a kitchen and left paw marks that hardened on tile. Every call had the same pattern. People thought the danger was the visible fog outside. Then the residue started working indoors because they brought it in on objects and shoes. The second phase of the disaster was not the cloud. It was contamination behavior after the cloud passed. At 4, federal language entered the feed. Airspace restrictions over part of southeast Houston. Requests for drone operators to stay grounded. Industrial mutual aid teams staging outside the affected zone. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality collecting samples. County Public Health asking hospitals to report coated tissue injuries and respiratory cases. The company still had not released the full material safety documentation. That failure made me angry in a clean, useful way. In industry, responders need product identity, hazards, incompatibilities, exposure routes, deactivation methods, and personal protective equipment guidance. Proprietary technology means nothing when firefighters are trying to cut a family out of a sealed apartment stairwell. The anchor asked what I would ask the company if they put an executive on air. I said I would ask 4 questions. What command frequency or signal pattern keeps the aerosol active? What materials does it preferentially target? What deactivation method has been tested outside laboratory conditions? What happens when it enters medical, electrical, or drainage systems? The anchor asked if they would answer. I said probably not until forced. That was not cynicism. That was experience. Companies protect liability while responders protect life. In a normal incident, those priorities fight quietly behind conference calls. On that day, the fight was live because the city was watching the consequences move through its own door hardware. At 4:32, Emily texted, "We are moving to internal shelter areas. Some exits unreliable. Stop calling. I will text." I stared at the message too long and almost missed the producer asking me another question. I kept answering questions because focused work was better than staring at the phone while my personal life started dropping pieces. I told viewers in hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, and schools to think in terms of open paths, not locked rooms. Keep hallways clear. Keep manual wheelchairs available. Move critical supplies out of sealed cabinets if contamination is nearby. Do not assume automatic doors will open. Do not assume elevators will keep service. Keep people away from loading docks, ambulance bays, and mechanical rooms unless trained staff direct them. The first confirmed power substation issue came from an area near the east side. It was not a giant blackout at first. It was flicker, relay faults, and protective trips. Gray residue on insulators and connectors can create paths electricity was not meant to take. If the material also tried to restore conductivity, it might bridge gaps that existed for safety. Electrical systems depend on separation. A switch open means current stops. A breaker gap means protection. Insulation means keep energy where it belongs. The fog treated some separations as defects. That meant a coated electrical yard could become unpredictable. Crews could not just walk in and wipe it off. They had to de-energize, test, ground, and work under conditions no manual covered. By 5, the sun had dropped lower, and the fog changed color in the camera feeds. It looked warmer, less threatening, which was dangerous for anyone judging by appearance. The substance was not weaker, because it photographed better. The calls got worse around that time because people came home from work and opened garages, sheds, school doors, clinics, and cars that had been sitting all day. A man in LaPorte opened a truck toolbox and found every wrench bonded together at the contact points. A woman near Pasadena tried to remove a coated child seat and found the latch plate sealed to the anchor. A bus driver said the wheelchair ramp on his bus deployed halfway and froze, blocking the front exit. One problem became many separate entrapments. I kept thinking about the annex test name from my report. Resilience Trial 7. Trial 7. That meant at least 6 earlier trials existed. Maybe all of them stayed inside. Maybe small anomalies were written off because the product was valuable and the failures were fixable. That is how a dangerous technology earns confidence one successful test at a time. It works in clean conditions. It works on sample beams. It works on pipe coupons. It works inside a sealed chamber. It works during a scripted field demonstration. Then somebody adds humidity, aging dampers, a bypassed interlock, a controller reboot, a schedule push, and a real city outside the fence. The technology did what the test taught it to do. The people failed to respect where the test ended. A caller from the annex perimeter finally got through. He said he was a contract pipe fitter who had been inside the outer yard when the release started. He did not want his name used. He said the fog came out of a vent stack first, then from under an overhead door after the alarm stuttered. Workers were told to shelter in a break room. The break room door sealed at the bottom. Somebody broke the safety glass with a chair, and people climbed out into the hall. When the fog had cleaned old rust from pipe supports and sealed threaded caps on sample ports. A supervisor kept saying the system was in safe mode. The caller said safe mode made it worse because moving parts stopped mid-position, and the coating locked them there. I asked if he saw anyone hurt. He paused long enough that the answer was already yes. A mechanic had his glove caught when a valve handle bonded to the stem and hand wheel. Another worker tried to pull him free and got residue on his wrist. They cut the glove, but the cuff had stiffened. The caller kept saying, "It wasn't attacking us." He needed that to be clear. I told him I understood. It was important. It was not attacking. It was correcting. That was the most honest word we had by then. Correcting without knowing what a person is. Correcting without knowing what an exit is. Correcting without knowing the difference between a crack in glass and a mouth that needs to open. At 5:40, the mayor's office announced a wider shelter order for affected corridors and requested that people stop driving unless evacuating from a directly threatened structure. Evacuation and shelter orders were now colliding. Some people needed to leave buildings with failing ventilation or sealed exits. Others needed to stay out of contaminated streets. The correct action depended on where the fog was, where the residue had entered, whether the building could breathe safely, whether exits worked, whether vulnerable people were inside, and whether transportation could move without failing. That is why simple crisis slogans break under technical disasters. Stay inside can save one person and trap another. Get out can save one building and send a family into contaminated drainage fog. Good instructions need conditions. The producer asked if I could come into the studio downtown. I told her no. I did not want to carry contamination inside, and I did not want to become dependent on building systems I had not inspected. My truck was clear so far, and I had bottled water, gloves, safety glasses, a half-face respirator from an old job bag, a flashlight, a battery radio, and a paper map I kept because phones fail at the worst time. That sounded prepared until the city started failing in ways my bag did not solve. My respirator filters were for particulates and some vapors, not unknown active material. My gloves were nitrile, useful for brief contact, not magic. The flashlight had a battery the fog might love if contaminated. Prepared does not mean safe. It means you get a few better choices. A message from Emily came at 6:05. Power stable, some doors bad. We have patients in interior hall, residue near supply elevators. We need manual tools. I answered. Wood wedges, dry blankets under doors only if not blocking air. Kill non-essential chargers. Keep coded equipment away from panels. She did not answer. I pictured her reading it while walking, maybe passing a phone to facilities, maybe ignoring half of it because patients were in front of her. That is the strange cruelty of being useful at a distance. You can give instructions. You cannot hold a door. The first deactivation rumor hit social media around sunset. Someone claimed salt water killed the fog. That was dangerous in Houston, near the ship channel, where salt air and brackish water are part of the environment, and corrosion is a daily enemy. I warned people not to dump salt water on residue. Salt water conducts electricity, accelerates corrosion, spreads material, and can make electrical hazards worse. Then another rumor said bleach worked. I shut that down too. Do not pour bleach on unknown industrial residue, especially near ammonia cleaners, acids, drains, or enclosed spaces. People were trying to turn kitchens into laboratories during a city emergency. Fear makes amateurs confident. That confidence hurts responders later. At 6:30, an ardent executive finally appeared in a recorded statement. He looked exhausted and overcoached. He said the material could not self-replicate in the biological sense. He said it had a finite active life. He said the company was working with authorities to broadcast a termination command. That last part should have reassured people. It did not reassure me. A termination command only helps if every active particle receives it, accepts it, and has not altered its own receiving surface, shielded itself inside material, or moved outside signal range. Also, if command emitters helped create the spread, broadcasting another command through the city could interact with contaminated electronics in ways nobody had field tested. The cure might work. It might also wake pockets that had started to sleep. The anchor asked me if they should broadcast the termination command over public radio or cellular emergency systems if authorities asked. I said no, not without verified instruction from emergency management and technical teams. Public communication systems are for messages to people, not experimental control of active materials. If the nanites had any chance of responding to common devices, blasting signals through consumer electronics could create new exposure points. That answer sounded cautious to the point of stubbornness. I stand by it. When you do not know what a system listens to, you do not turn every phone in Houston into a possible speaker. The hospital situation worsened after sunset because evening temperature changes shifted airflow. Emily finally called, whispering because she was in a patient area. She said some automatic fire doors had closed during an alarm caused by a smoke detector fault, and 3 of those doors had sealed at the edges after residue collected in the frame. Staff were rerouting through service corridors. One corridor had a coated floor near a supply elevator, slick enough that 2 people fell. A portable suction unit failed when its housing sealed around the motor vents and overheated. A nurse cut her hand breaking a medication drawer open, then everybody yelled at her not to let residue touch the cut. The hospital was not falling in one dramatic moment. It was losing functions room by room. I told her I was coming closer but not entering unless she needed extraction. She said, "You're not extracting anybody from here." That was the nurse voice. Direct, irritated, correct. She said they needed better public instructions for families calling patients. People were telling relatives to leave hospitals, which was not always possible and sometimes unsafe. I went back on air and said it plainly. Do not flood hospitals with calls unless you are coordinating care for a specific patient. Do not drive to hospitals inside or near the affected area unless instructed. Do not tell patients to pull out lines, leave monitored beds, or force doors. Staff inside are making movement decisions based on building conditions you cannot see from home. Night made the fog harder to track. Under streetlights, it showed near the ground. In dark lots, it disappeared until headlights hit it, and by then a driver could already be inside. Emergency vehicles began using spotlights low across pavement to check for visible layers before entering streets. That helped with fog, but not residue. Residue did not need to float. It waited on handles, steps, rails, used latches, vents, and floors. One firefighter on the live line said crews were marking contaminated doors with spray paint when they could, but some paint cans clogged after use near the material. They switched to tying cloth strips to nearby objects, which only worked until cloth got wet or people stole them for masks. Every workaround created another small problem. Around 8 at night, the city tried the termination command in a controlled industrial zone near the annex. We did not hear the command, but we saw the result through a helicopter feed before the airspace tightened again. The fog in one yard thinned. Coating activity slowed on a row of pipe supports. Then 2 transformers nearby tripped, and the video cut to a wide shot. The official statement called it partial success with localized electrical complications. That meant it worked enough to continue, and failed enough to scare everybody involved. I told viewers not to celebrate and not to panic. Partial success is still information. It meant the system could be influenced. It also meant infrastructure near active material might react badly during command attempts. The producer asked me what I thought the command did. I said maybe it told the machines to enter dormant state, release surface charge, stop bonding, or consume their remaining stored power. The electrical trips suggested some of them dumped energy, changed conductivity, or caused protective systems to see faults. I was guessing, and I said I was guessing. People needed honesty more than confidence. A wrong confident voice can kill people in a technical disaster. A careful voice might frustrate them, but frustration beats false certainty. At 8:36, Emily sent a location pin from inside the hospital and one line. We are moving patients past old loading corridor. Residue ahead. Maintenance cutting wall panel. I called. No answer. I started driving toward the Texas Medical Center, taking west and south routes that avoided the worst alerts. Roads were thinner than I expected. Gas stations were closing. Convenience stores had handwritten signs. Some traffic lights flickered or stayed dark. Police blocked certain underpasses because fog had collected there after the evening humidity rose. I kept the truck vents on recirculate, windows up, headlights low enough to catch ground haze, and speed under what felt normal. Speed is useless when the road itself might change under you. The broadcast stayed open through my phone. The anchor kept asking callers for locations and conditions, not rumors. That was one good thing the newsroom did all day. They became a filter. Not perfect, but better than the raw feed. A man reported fog near Brays Bayou. Another caller corrected him and said it was steam from a generator. The producer checked a traffic camera and held the report until confirmed. A woman claimed a bridge had collapsed. It had not. A security guard at a warehouse said employees were trapped behind a sealed roll-up door. That one was real. The guard gave the address. Dispatch already knew. The broadcast did not save everyone, but it reduced some bad decisions. In a day built from bad information, that mattered. I reached the edge of the Texas Medical Center after 9. The campus was lit, but not in a normal way. Some buildings had full power. Others had dark vertical strips where sections were shut down or isolated. Ambulances staged in odd positions, not crowding the usual bays. Security and police had blocked streets to keep family cars from jamming the approaches. I parked farther out than I wanted and stayed inside the truck while I checked wind, alerts, and messages from Emily. The medical center is a dense place, full of hospitals, research buildings, clinics, garages, sky bridges, service drives, and people who cannot simply walk away. A contamination problem there is not one building's problem. It becomes a movement problem. Emily finally answered at 9:18. She said she was not leaving. That was the first thing she said because she knew what I had come to ask. She and a group of staff were helping move patients from a compromised older corridor into a cleaner internal area. Maintenance had opened a wall panel after a pair of automatic doors sealed and trapped 2 supply techs in a short connector hall. Nobody had died there, but one tech had a bad asthma attack before they got him out. Residue had entered through a loading area where contaminated carts were brought in before anyone understood the transfer risk. The hospital was now treating the loading area as hot, the nearby corridor as warm, and interior patient areas as clean until proven otherwise. That was good contamination logic under pressure. I asked what she needed. She said, "Tell people to stop showing up." So I did. I went live from my truck, voice rough by then, and told families that hospitals near the affected zones needed access lanes clear for ambulances, maintenance crews, utility crews, and decontamination teams. I told them love is not always arrival. Sometimes love is staying off the road, keeping phone lines clear, and waiting for verified instructions. I hated how that sounded, but it was true. 100 scared relatives can block 1 oxygen delivery, 1 repair truck, 1 ambulance transfer. Good intentions can build a traffic jam that kills strangers. At 9:45, the second termination attempt hit a wider area. We knew because residue on a street sign near my parking spot changed. The gray surface lost its wet sheen and turned dull. The edge stopped creeping around a bolt head. That was the first time all day I watched the material stop. I set it on air, but carefully. The coating near me appears inactive. That does not mean safe to touch. Inactive material can still seal, block, conduct, contaminate, or break loose later. A dead trap is still a trap. A sealed exit remains sealed after the thing that sealed it stops moving. People heard the word inactive and wanted to go outside. I spent the next 10 minutes telling them not to. The electrical grid took another hit after that wider command. Parts of the east side lost power. Some outages were planned isolation. Some were fault trips. Some were probably equipment protection. Officials did not separate them fast enough for public use. In the dark areas, people opened windows for air and then remembered the warnings. Generators started up. Generators need air intake, fuel, exhaust clearance, and working sensors. A residue near a generator can block a cooling vent, seal a fuel cap, bridge a connector, or shut down a sensor. We started giving generator advice because carbon monoxide would kill people while everyone stared at the fog. Run generators outside only. Keep them away from doors and windows. Do not operate coated equipment. Do not refuel near residue. If a generator changes sound, shut it down if safe and move away. A man called from a small apartment building near Pasadena with a hallway full of elderly residents. Their power was out, and the front security door had sealed. The rear exit opened, but the alley behind it had visible fog near the ground. He wanted to know which way to move people. That was the kind of question nobody on a broadcast should have to answer, yet he had no other line. I asked about their air, heat, medical needs, and whether the fog was entering. He said the hallway air was clear, but one resident used oxygen and the concentrator was dead. I told him to call emergency services again, keep the rear exit cracked only if fog was not entering, move the oxygen patient near the rear but not outside, and have one able adult watch the alley while another watched the sealed front. Conditions, not slogans. Always conditions. At 10:30, Ardent released a technical bulletin under government pressure. It confirmed the material was a distributed autonomous maintenance system intended for corrosion removal, crack sealing, electrical continuity restoration, and temporary structural stabilization. It used local oxides, airborne moisture, trace binders, and micro-encapsulated energy storage. It responded to command emitters and could enter a low-activity state when command loss persisted, but active pockets might continue where external energy sources were present. The bulletin warned against contact with wounds, powered equipment, moving mechanical assemblies, medical devices, open drains, and ventilation intakes. Reading that after 12 hours of lived evidence made me furious. They had the words all along. They released them after the city had already learned by injury. The bulletin also listed a tested deactivation method involving a narrowband command sequence, followed by controlled grounding and dry particulate capture. That meant responders needed specialized transmitters, grounding procedures, and collection equipment. It was not a household fix. It was not salt water, bleach, magnets, microwaves, or pressure washers. It was a technical cleanup operation across a living city. I read the useful parts on air and skipped the corporate cover language. The anchor asked if people should download the bulletin. I said yes, but do not let curiosity overload emergency websites. One person per household, screenshot the instructions, share by text, and stop refreshing every minute. Near 11, Emily came out through a staff-only exit, with a group transferring supplies to another building. I saw her from across a blocked drive but did not run to her because there were security lines, contamination zones, and people moving equipment. She looked tired, hair pulled back, mask marked at the edges, scrubs covered by a disposable gown. She saw my truck and pointed at me with 2 fingers, then pointed down. Stay there. I stayed there. That small order was the most married thing that happened all day. She loaded boxes onto a cart with 2 other nurses, spoke to a facilities worker, then disappeared inside again. I wanted a reunion. The day gave me line of sight and nothing more. That was enough to know she was alive. The broadcast kept going. We shifted from immediate fog warnings to overnight survival instructions. Keep one exit path checked and clear. Keep shoes on or near you. Do not sleep in rooms with only one coded door. Turn off non-essential chargers near contaminated objects. Keep pets away from residue. Bag exposed clothing outside living spaces if possible. Do not use coded stoves, generators, heaters, elevators, garage doors, or medical devices unless cleared. Check on neighbors by phone first, not by entering contaminated buildings, where Mark blocked exits with tape, cloth, or furniture, so nobody wastes time trying them during a later emergency. Keep water in containers, but do not collect runoff from contaminated roofs or gutters. At 11:38, the fog near the original release site was reported mostly inactive, but the incident was nowhere near over. That is another thing people misunderstand about technical disasters. The release can stop and the disaster continues through damaged systems. Doors remained sealed. Vehicles remained disabled. Elevators remained stuck. Breaker panels could not be opened. Drainage areas were contaminated. Hospital equipment had to be inspected piece by piece. Schools had to account for children moved through multiple rooms. First responders had tools fouled by residue. Utility crews had substations and panels needing de-energized evaluation. A city can survive the active hazard and still spend days trapped by what the hazard changed. Just before midnight, the anchor asked me to summarize the day. I did not want to. Summaries make disasters sound cleaner than they are. Still, people needed the shape of it. I said a restricted industrial test escaped because containment, shutdown, and command control failed together. The material was designed to repair infrastructure by following simple target rules. Outside the test area, those rules interacted with real life. It cleaned rust, sealed cracks, restored conductivity, immobilized loose parts, and closed openings. Those same actions trapped people, disabled vehicles, damaged hospital operations, blocked vents, altered tools, fouled electrical systems, and contaminated wounds. The danger was not a machine deciding to hurt us. The danger was a machine never being taught what hurting us meant. After the segment ended, I sat in the truck with the phone still in my hand and listened to the open line hum. The city was quieter than it should have been for a Houston night. Not silent. Never silent. Helicopters moved somewhere east. A siren ran for a while, stopped, then another picked up farther away. A generator coughed behind a building and settled into a rough rhythm. My truck smelled of stale coffee, sweat, and the rubber floor mats I had been afraid to touch with dirty shoes. I checked my sleeves, my gloves, my door handles, my vents. Safety habits become personal when the hazard has no face. Emily texted at 12:16 in the morning. Alive. Staying. Do not wait at entrance. Go home if route clear. I did not go home. I moved to a safer parking area outside the restricted hospital perimeter and slept badly in the driver's seat for 20 minutes at a time. The broadcast replayed warnings between live updates. Some neighborhoods slept with doors propped open because they feared ceiling. Others slept with windows taped because they feared fog. Some people had both fears at once and no perfect answer. That was the honest condition of the city after the first day. No perfect answers. Only better choices. Made late, with incomplete information. By dawn, the fog had mostly fallen out or gone inactive in the open air, but residue remained in every place the day had touched. The annex was sealed by state and federal teams. Ardent executives had lawyers beside them. On crews marked hot zones around drains, mechanical rooms, loading docks, underpasses, and buildings with confirmed coding activity. Hospitals kept diverting certain cases while they inspected ventilation and equipment. Schools stayed closed. The ship channel slowed. People in clear neighborhoods finally understood the east side had not overreacted. People in the affected zones started counting what no longer opened. I went back on the air because the producer asked, and because my voice was already part of the record. I told people the second day would be less visible and more dangerous in some ways. Inactive residue would tempt cleanup. Broken systems would tempt shortcuts. Insurance adjusters, managers, landlords, and bosses would push people back inside before inspections were done. Do not let clean-looking surfaces fool you. Do not let anyone call a sealed fire door cosmetic damage. Do not let anyone pressure you to operate coded machinery, enter a contaminated mechanical room alone, or reopen a building because the fog was gone. The fog was only the part you could see moving. The real incident was the rule set it left behind. I also told them something I wish I had been wrong about. The lawsuits would come. The hearings would come. The company would say the technology had passed prior tests. Regulators would say the facility had paperwork. Engineers would explain how the system was never intended to operate outside bounded conditions. Managers would say no single deficiency caused the release. All of that might be partly true and still not enough. The bypass mattered. The dampers mattered. The scrubber mattered. The controller reboot mattered. The closed work order mattered. The decision to continue testing mattered. Industrial disasters are built from small permissions. Somebody permits a deviation. Somebody permits a delay. Somebody permits a test before a fix. Then the city finds out what those permissions cost. People kept asking if the nanite fog meant the future had failed. I do not think that is the right question. The future did not fail. A company did what companies do when a valuable technology is almost ready, and the people raising slow, boring safety concerns are treated as obstacles. The technology was powerful. It was not supernatural. It needed power, material, command signals, and target rules. It followed those rules with discipline. Humans supplied the bad boundary. Humans supplied the weak shutdown. Humans supplied the public relations sentence that called it harmless vapor while it was sealing doors across southeast Houston. That is why I am recording this the way I remember it, hour by hour, mistake by mistake. Not because I want anyone afraid of every new machine. Fear alone does not make people safer. Understanding does. If you live near industrial sites, know your shelter instructions, but also know your building. Know how your air comes in. Know more than one exit. Keep manual tools. Keep paper copies of important contacts. Do not touch strange residue because it looks useful. Do not trust a company statement more than what your own eyes and local responders are telling you. And when a safety inspector says a small failure can become a citywide disaster, do not wait until the sky over the freeway turns gray to believe him.